I was 16 years old when this happened. My parents had left for a wedding in another city. They were supposed to stay overnight and return the next afternoon. I had begged them to let me stay home because I had exams coming up and didn't want to waste an entire weekend traveling. After a lot of convincing, they finally agreed. At first, having the whole house to myself felt amazing. I ordered pizza, watched movies, and enjoyed the rare silence. Our house sat at the end of a quiet street. Most of the neighbors were older couples who usually stayed indoors after dark. By 10 o'clock that night, the entire neighborhood seemed dead. Around 11, I locked every door and window, turned off the downstairs lights, and headed to my bedroom. Everything felt normal. Until midnight. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard a sound from downstairs. A single knock. It wasn't loud. Just knock. I paused my video and listened. Nothing. A few seconds later, I heard it again. Knock. It sounded like someone tapping on the front door. I checked my phone. 12:03 a.m. Who would be visiting at that hour? I carefully got out of bed and walked to the top of the stairs. The house was completely dark. The only light came from the street lamp outside, shining through the front window. Then I heard a third knock. Knock. This time it was definitely the front door. My stomach tightened. I quietly walked downstairs and looked through the peephole. Nobody. The porch was empty. I opened the porch light. Still nobody. I stood there for nearly 30 seconds. Nothing moved. Eventually, I convinced myself it was probably kids playing a prank. I turned off the porch light and went back upstairs. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message said, "Why didn't you answer the door?" I stared at the screen. My chest immediately felt cold. I hadn't told anyone I was home alone. Not even my friends. I typed back. "Who is this?" No response. 5 minutes passed. Then another text arrived. "I can see you." I felt my entire body tense. I rushed to the bedroom window and looked outside. The street was empty. No cars. No people. Nothing. I pulled the curtains shut and locked the window. A minute later, another message appeared. "Closing the curtains won't help." At that moment, my heart nearly stopped. Whoever was texting me had just watched me close them. I immediately called my parents. No answer. They were probably asleep. I called again. Still nothing. Then another text arrived. "Don't call anyone." I remember staring at those words while trying to convince myself this was some kind of sick joke. Maybe one of my friends. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone messing around. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. My hands shook as I answered. "Hello." Silence. No breathing. No background noise. Nothing. Then a man's voice whispered, "You're alone." The call ended. I immediately locked my bedroom door. For the next 20 minutes I sat on my bed listening. Every tiny noise in the house sounded suspicious. The refrigerator. The air vents. The pipes. Everything. At 12:47 a.m., I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Downstairs. Slow. Deliberate. Walking across the living room. I froze. There was no way. I had locked every door. The footsteps continued. One step. Another. Then silence. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet. I knew I should call the police, but a part of me still believed I was imagining things. Then I heard the sound of a cabinet opening downstairs. Followed by another. Someone was searching through the house. I called 911 immediately. The operator answered. I whispered everything. She told me to stay in my room and remain quiet while officers were dispatched. Then came the worst sound of all. The footsteps started climbing the stairs. Slowly. One step at a time. Creak. 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 The staircase led directly toward my room. I could barely breathe. The operator remained on the line. The footsteps reached the second floor. Then stopped. For several seconds there was complete silence. Then someone tried my bedroom door handle. Click. 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 I gripped the baseball bat so hard my hands hurt. The handle stopped moving. A few moments later, I heard a whisper from the other side of the door. I know you're in there. I felt tears forming in my eyes. I was absolutely terrified. Then came a loud bang. The door shook. Another bang. The entire frame rattled. The man was trying to force his way inside. I remember backing into the corner of my room while the operator repeatedly told me officers were only minutes away. The banging continued. Each hit sounded stronger than the last. Then suddenly, it stopped. Completely. No footsteps. No voice. Nothing. The silence was somehow worse. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Then I heard sirens. Distant at first. Then growing louder. The moment the sirens reached our street, I heard running footsteps outside my bedroom. The intruder was fleeing. Seconds later, I heard the front door slam. Police arrived less than a minute after that. I remained locked inside until officers identified themselves. When they searched the house, they found something horrifying. The man had never forced entry. He had already been inside before my parents left. According to police, he had entered through our garage earlier that evening and hidden in a storage room connected to the basement. He had waited silently for hours. Watching. Listening. Learning the layout of the house. The knocks on the door were just a game. He wanted me scared. He wanted me to know someone was there. Officers later discovered muddy footprints throughout parts of the basement. They also found cigarette butts and an empty water bottle that didn't belong to anyone in my family. But the creepiest discovery came from outside. Behind a bush near my bedroom window, police found a small folding chair. Someone had been sitting there. Watching me. Watching my room. Watching the house. The man was never caught. Police believed he escaped through a nearby wooded area before they arrived. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep without every light in the house turned on. Every creak made me jump. Every unknown phone number terrified me. Even now, years later, I still double-check every door and window before bed. Because one thing still bothers me. The police checked my phone records. The unknown number that had texted and called me couldn't be traced. It was a disposable phone purchased with cash. Whoever that man was. He knew exactly when I was home alone. And sometimes I wonder if he had been watching our house long before that night. Maybe for days. Maybe for weeks. Waiting for the perfect opportunity. Waiting for the night when I would be completely alone. And if the police had arrived just 5 minutes later. I honestly don't want to think about what might have happened next. This happened in the fall of 2019 when I was 19 years old. At the time, my parents had gone out of town for 3 days to attend a family event. Since I had college classes and a part-time job, I stayed behind and had the house completely to myself. The first day was normal. The second day was strange. And the third day became the most terrifying experience of my life. Our house was old. Very old. It had been built sometime in the 1940s and was filled with the kinds of noises old houses make. The floors creaked. The pipes groaned. The walls occasionally popped during temperature changes. Because of that, unusual sounds never really bothered me. At least not at first. The first odd thing happened on Friday night. I was sitting in the living room watching Netflix when I heard a loud thump from above. It sounded like something heavy had fallen in the attic. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Just silence. I shrugged it off. Old houses make weird noises. That was my explanation. The next morning I woke up around 9 and headed downstairs. The kitchen looked normal except for one thing. A cabinet door was open. I specifically remembered closing it before going to bed. I figured I had forgotten. Not a big deal. I closed it and continued my day. Later that afternoon I left for work. When I returned around 7 in the evening, I noticed something strange. The television in the guest room was on. I stopped in the hallway. I was absolutely certain I hadn't turned it on. In fact, I hadn't even entered that room all day. The TV displayed static. No channel. Just static. I turned it off. Again, I told myself there was probably a logical explanation. Maybe a power fluctuation. Maybe some weird electrical issue. That night I started hearing noises above my bedroom. Not loud noises. Small ones. Tiny footsteps that at least that's what they sounded like. I remember lying in bed trying to convince myself it was a squirrel or raccoon. The attic had vents. Animals occasionally got inside. It happened. Still, something felt wrong. The sound seemed too deliberate. Too controlled. Almost like someone was walking carefully. Trying not to be heard. Around 2:30 in the morning, the noises stopped. Eventually I fell asleep. The following day was Saturday. I spent most of the afternoon cleaning. While vacuuming the hallway, I noticed something unusual near the attic access panel. A small pile of dust. At first I didn't think much of it. Then I realized the dust hadn't been there the day before. It looked fresh. As though the attic hatch had recently been opened. I stared at it for a moment. Then laughed at myself. I was letting my imagination get carried away. That evening, I ordered takeout and watched movies downstairs. Around midnight, I went into the kitchen for a drink. That's when I noticed something that made me uncomfortable. The loaf of bread on the counter was open. Not just open. Several slices were missing. I lived alone that weekend. Nobody else should have been eating it. I stood there staring at the bag. Trying to remember whether I had made sandwiches earlier. Maybe I had. Maybe I forgot. But honestly, I knew I hadn't. For the first time, I considered the possibility that someone had entered the house. I checked every door. Every window. Everything was locked. Nothing appeared disturbed. Eventually I convinced myself I was overreacting. Then came Saturday night. The night everything changed. Around 1:15 a.m., I woke to a strange sound. Dragging. Something was being dragged across the ceiling above my room. I sat upright immediately. The sound continued. Slow. Heavy. Scraping. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The sound stopped. Silence. Then came 3 slow footsteps. Directly above me. I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed that something was wrong. I quietly left my room and moved into the hallway. The attic entrance was located near the bathroom ceiling. I pointed my flashlight upward. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed it. The attic hatch wasn't completely closed. There was a small gap. Only about an inch. But it definitely hadn't been like that before. My stomach dropped. I stood there for several seconds. Listening. Nothing. No movement. No sounds. Finally, I grabbed a chair and placed it beneath the hatch. I don't know why. Looking back, it was incredibly stupid. If someone had actually been up there, I should have called the police immediately. Instead, curiosity took over. I climbed onto the chair, slowly pushed the hatch upward, and shined my flashlight inside. At first, I saw nothing. Just insulation and wooden beams. Then the light moved farther back, and I nearly fell off the chair. There was a sleeping area. A blanket. Pillows. Empty food wrappers. Water bottles. Someone had been living up there. I jumped down immediately. My heart felt like it would explode. I backed away from the attic entrance. Then I heard movement. Fast movement. Directly above me. The person was still there. I ran downstairs and locked myself inside the laundry room while calling 911. The operator stayed on the line while officers responded. For the next 7 minutes, I listened. Footsteps. Above me. Then downstairs. Then silence. Then footsteps again. Whoever was in the attic had come down. I remember staring at the locked laundry room door, expecting the handle to move at any second. Thankfully it never did. When police arrived, they searched the house carefully. The intruder was gone, but evidence of his presence was everywhere. Inside the attic, officers discovered a sleeping bag, several weeks' worth of food packaging, empty water containers, batteries, flashlights, and something even more disturbing. Photographs. Pictures of me. Dozens of them. Some showed me entering the house. Others showed me taking out trash, walking to my car, mowing the lawn, living my normal life. The oldest photograph was almost 2 months old. That meant someone had been watching me for weeks. Possibly longer. Police believed the man had been entering through a damaged vent near the rear section of the roof. After climbing into the attic, he could move freely without being noticed. He would come down only when nobody was home, or while people were asleep. Investigators later determined that food had been disappearing from our house for months. Small amounts. Never enough for anyone to notice. A few slices of bread. A can of soup. A bottle of water. Things people easily forget. The most horrifying discovery came from my bedroom. Hidden behind a dresser was a small observation hole. A hole that connected directly to the attic. Someone had been watching me sleep. For who knows how long. Police never caught the man. Despite fingerprints and evidence collected from the attic, his identity remained unknown. My parents sold the house less than a year later. None of us felt comfortable living there anymore. Even now, I occasionally think about those photographs. The idea that someone could live above your head for weeks. Listening to your conversations. Watching your routines. Learning your habits. Waiting for moments when you're vulnerable. It's terrifying. But the thing that scares me most happened after we moved. Several months later, my father received a call from a detective. A neighboring town had experienced a similar case. Another family discovered someone secretly living inside their attic. The setup was nearly identical. Food wrappers. Sleeping bags. Hidden observation points. The suspect escaped before police arrived. To this day, investigators don't know whether it was the same person. And honestly, I don't want to know. Because somewhere out there is a person who spent weeks living above my bedroom ceiling. Watching me. Waiting. This happened when I was 17 years old. My parents had left early one Saturday morning to visit relatives in another city. They were supposed to return that night, so I spent the day alone at home. Everything was normal until around 8 p.m. I was upstairs in my bedroom playing games when I heard the front door open. A few seconds later, I heard my dad's voice. "Hey, we're home." I smiled. They had returned earlier than expected. Without thinking, I shouted back, "Okay." But something felt strange. I hadn't heard the car pull into the driveway. Normally, our old car was loud enough to hear from anywhere in the house. I paused and listened. Silence. Then my dad's voice came again from downstairs. "Come down here for a minute." The voice sounded right. Exactly like my father. Still, something felt off. I opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. The downstairs lights were off. The entire first floor was dark. "Dad?" I called. No answer. Then the voice returned. "I'm in the kitchen." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "We'll be home in about 2 hours." I stared at the message. My heart instantly began racing. If my parents were still 2 hours away, then who had spoken downstairs? I quickly texted back. "Are you serious? You're not home?" A few seconds later she replied, "No." "Why?" I didn't answer. I quietly stepped back into my room and locked the door. Then I called my parents. My father answered immediately. "Dad, are you really not home?" "No. We're still driving." "What's wrong?" Before I could answer, I heard something downstairs. A chair scraping across the kitchen floor. Slowly. Deliberately. The sound echoed through the house. My father heard it through the phone. "What was that?" I whispered. "Someone is downstairs." His tone changed instantly. "Call the police right now." I hung up and dialed emergency services. While waiting for officers, I turned off my bedroom light and hid in my closet. The operator remained on the line. Then came the footsteps. Slow footsteps climbing the stairs. One step. Then another. And another. I could hear every creak. The person was heading directly toward my room. I covered my mouth to stop myself from breathing too loudly. The footsteps reached the hallway. Then stopped. Silence. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard my father's voice again. Right outside my bedroom door. "Open the door." I nearly screamed. It sounded exactly like him. Every word. Every detail. But I knew it wasn't him. "Open the door," the voice repeated. Then came a soft knock. 3 slow taps. I remained completely still. The person stood there for nearly a minute. Then the doorknob moved. Slowly. Trying to turn. Luckily, the door was locked. After a few seconds, the handle stopped moving. Then the footsteps walked away. I continued hiding in the closet, shaking uncontrollably. A few minutes later, police sirens filled the street. I heard running downstairs. Then a back door slam. The intruder was escaping. Police searched the house but found nobody. However, they discovered that someone had entered through an unlocked basement window. The officer later told me something I'll never forget. A neighbor's security camera had captured a man standing outside our house for nearly 3 hours before breaking in. Watching. Waiting. Studying the house. Police believed he had heard my parents talking outside on previous occasions and learned what my father's voice sounded like. He had been imitating him. Trying to lure me downstairs. Trying to get me close enough. The man was never identified. And even today, years later, whenever someone calls my name from another room while I'm home alone, I always make sure I know exactly who's in the house before I answer.